Original first Yod verbs. We have looked at first Vav verbs, which are verbs that have a Yod, a first Yod in the Kal, so like Yashav, but in the other binyan you see the Vav. So it's actually a first Vav verb. Now let's look at the verbs that truly are first Yods, original first Yod verbs. A couple things to say initially. First is that they are generally stative verbs. Yatav is probably the most important. Yatav means to be good. Yatav is the most important first Yod, original first Yod verb, and it's stative, to be good. Also, they only occur in the Kal and the Hifil. And if you take a look at your chart at the back of Ross on page 551, he has two paradigms for first Yod verbs, and he just has the Kal and the Hifil, and that's because that's the only place they show up. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are only 7 original first Yod verbs, and here they are. And this list comes from João Maroca, his grammar on page 198. The first one here I've got listed is Yavash, or Yavesh, to be dry, a stative verb. And these numbers here are the number of occurrences in the Hebrew Bible, at least according to my search in Accordance. Accordance is a program I use for morphological searching. Yanek, to suck, 33 occurrences. Yashar, to be straight, another stative, 27. This is actually less than this, but I've come across this one more, I think, in my reading. Yatav, to be good. This is the one I mentioned. This is the most important, just because of the number of occurrences, to be good. The reason there's no vowels here is because Yatav does not show up in the perfect. It doesn't exist in the perfect. And if you look it up in BDB, the classic dictionary, Hebrew dictionary, you'll see that the entry is written like this. It's got square brackets around it, which indicates that it doesn't show up in that form. But you still look it up, Yud Tav Beit. You'll still find it under this here. Yakatz, again, it doesn't show up in the perfect. To wake up, this is a minor one. Yalal, to groan, also fairly minor, at least I haven't run into it. Yaman, again, it doesn't show up in the perfect. This verb, meaning to go to the right, only shows up 4 times, but in the noun form, you have Yamin, as in Benjamin, son of my right hand. So this root shows up elsewhere. Anyway, there are only 7 original first Yod verbs, which is kind of nice because you've got a small set of verbs there. And Yatav is the most important one, most frequent one. Now, there are a couple of forms a couple of first Vav verbs that sometimes behave like first Yud. I call them first Yud-like. So some verbs are first Yud-like in some forms. And the 2 most important ones are Yareh, to be afraid, and Yarash, to inherit. And you can see how many occurrences they have here. Lots of them, right? Now, I find Ross's description here a little bit confusing because in the textbook, in chapter 35, 35.5.2 and 35.5.1, he talks about first Yud, and he uses these verbs as his examples. And it isn't totally clear that these are not really first Yud verbs. I would prefer to see these as first Vav verbs that are sometimes behaving as first Yud. And you know they're first Vav because Yareh, for instance, has verbs in the Nifal. And first Yud verbs don't have anything in the Nifal. And in the Nifal, you see the Vav. The Vav shows up. Remember this kind of construction here? The Vav shows up like this in the Nifal. So we know that this is really is a first Vav verb that sometimes behaves like a first Yud, particularly in the Kal. And Yarash as well has a Vav in the Hifil. You see it in the Hifil. You don't see it behaving like a first Yud in the Hifil. You see Vav in the Nifal as well, and even in the Kal. In the Kal infinitive construct and in the imperative, it'll behave like a first Vav. And if you look at Ross's section 35.5.2, where he talks about original first yud, imperative, and infinitive construct, he highlights that Yarash here can have imperatives and infinitive construct like first vavs. But the impression he gives is that this is a first yud that's behaving like a first vav. I would say it's the other way around. These are really first vavs, and that's why it's not surprising that they will have first vav behavior. These here, these are your first yuds. Okay, you only have 7, not these. But because there's so many of them, it's good to know that they can show up, especially in the Cal, looking like first yuds. Okay. Did I want to say anything else by way of introduction? Okay, I guess we're moving right in here. Here we have yatav. Now yatav, again, yatav meaning to be good, is the most important of the first yuds, original first yuds, and this is in fact the paradigm verb that Ross uses in his tables at the back of the book. It's in his textbook itself that he uses yarash, which is really a first vav verb. But in his tables at the back he uses yatav, which is good, because that's a true first yud. What we see here is that in all these forms, the perfect, the participles, the imperative, and the infinitives, in all of them, they are behaving just like strong verbs. Okay? So first yud is actually really easy. The yud here is a consonant, yatav just like pakad. Okay? Yetov just like pekod. Yotev just like pokad. Everything is completely normal. Here, the only difference we have is that we have a patach for a theme vowel, but again, that's because it's stative. So that's not odd. We have that in the strong verbs as well. So yud is a consonant in all these forms. Now, I'll talk about the imperfect and the preterite justice cohortative in the next section, but just because we have it all up here, the main difference here between these red forms and these prefix forms is that the yud is a vowel here. Here it's a consonant, just like a normal, any other consonant. Here it's a vowel. It is quiesced and become a vowel. So, but you can still see it. You can still see the yud. So it's not hard. These forms are easy to recognize. Okay. Regular. In most forms, these red forms, they're regular, just like the strong verb. Next module, we'll look at these here, the imperfects.